Vertical integration. That's the topic we're going to analyze, understanding to what extent, if you're running a company, you should integrate other activities within your operations. Hello, my name is Álvaro Cuervo, and this is part of the course of strategy. So let's analyze vertical integration and how this fits within the analysis of a strategy. The story is how do you use the sources of competitive advantage. We started with an analysis of growth, then we got into the story of competition, and now it is vertical integration. For this, we are going to commence the discussion with a brief introduction to the meaning of vertical integration, different types of vertical integration, and then we get into two different situations. One, which is the analysis of when should we think about integrating vertically. It's going to be mostly an analysis coming from economics and transaction cost economics in particular. Another is going to be the decision, which is kind of the reverse. Or you can think it as the two sides of the same coin, which is when do you outsource, strategic outsourcing, and that particular point of view is going to be coming from the resource-based view, coming from core competences. So let's start with a brief introduction to vertical integration. What do we mean by vertical integration? Expansion across segments of the value chain. Now, the value chain, this is a concept that we already discussed before, and this is the initial analysis of identification of competitive advantage. It was one of the frameworks. It was the company value chain. Remember the story of inbound, output, inbound, input, output activities. Raw materials, parts come in, that's the inbound logistics. Then you do something with them, you put them together, you reshape them, change them. That's operations. Then you move them and distribute them. That's the story of outbound logistics. Marketing and sales, and finally you provide some service. That's the primary activities. Supporting those primary activities, we have technology, we have human resources, we have infrastructure, and we have procurement. That's the, if you want, foundational analysis of the discussion. There is also, and this is important, another type of value chain, which is the industry level value chain. So that representation of the company level, that company fits within the industry, and you're going to have different segments, and you're going to have companies that are focused on raw materials, and they are going to have their own value chain. They're going to have companies that those raw materials become the input for the producers of components, of parts, that then become the inputs for the company. We are assuming that the company is in the middle. The products of that company then get distributed to others, and then you end up with somebody eventually recycling the product. This is the industry level value chain, and the question here is within the company, which of the segments are we going to control, and then also within the industry, do we want to go into controlling different segments, or do we just concentrate in a few of them? This means that we have two different types of vertical integration: backward, which is what we tend to think about it. It's typically vertical integration. Oh, we're buying our suppliers, all of a sudden we control it, the suppliers of the suppliers of the suppliers. To what extent do you want to go back into integrating segments before the raw materials and components before they come to your company? We also have a forward integration, in which, well, now let's get into distribution, let's get closer to the final consumer so that we can eventually learn from them. That's the typical story coming from there. Or you can go in both cases, in both ways. This is choice. All of this is choice. Many of these segments, we are going to have companies that operate only in the segments, in that particular segment, and we are also going to have companies that operate in several segments, and some of them are going to be completely vertically integrated. Why is it that some of the managers decide this is our business, that's the only thing we do, whereas others think, no, we'd better be controlling supply, or we'd better be controlling distribution as well as our own operations? That's the analysis that we have now. So let's start with the story of why, when do you want to vertically integrate? Why should you do this? This is informed from point of view of transaction cost economics, and it's mostly economics. And we have two broad approaches to this. The first one, which is a traditional transaction cost economics approach, is the story of some market failure. And because there are few buyers and sellers, we have to get into issues of negotiation. That means that no, I cannot get, if you want, from perfect competition, very low prices for the products. There is going to be some level of monopolistic behavior in some cases. There is also, and this is an important distinction, we have asset specificity. This means that assets in which I invest are going to be specific to those relationships. It might be because geographically it's better to put the producer of one part next to the buyer of that part, so that there is very nice coordination in terms of distance. Or you want a more basic example, you have a refinery. It's easier if the refinery is close to the mining operation, so that there is very little cost in terms of transportation. You also have technical specificity, which is, look, our machines work really well with your machines. Our technology is very tied to your technology. We work much better when products come one after the other, and you do something and then it goes to the next step. And we have coordinated that operation. For example, that I am a refiner. I have designed my cracking facility so that it works with a particular type of petroleum. So it will be better if all of a sudden those two activities are together, or there might be some human capital specificity. I work really well with this supplier. I have invested in creating good relationships. I can always call them. They can always call me. Okay, what about this? Should we invest this together? There is a really nice tight human relation that works to improve efficiency, and maybe we should consider, well, why don't we put everything together? The story of asset specificity means that I invest a lot in this relationship, and if it fails for whatever reason, all those investments have a very low secondary value. I have to find somebody else to work with, and yes, I had great connections, but this other company, I don't really have the connections. I lose a lot of value from those investments. Maybe I'm going to go to work with somebody in another site. Now we get into issues of transportation costs, or maybe the machines don't work as well as with the second, that other supplier or distributor. There is a much lower level that I can extract from those assets. So there might be an incentive. Why don't we just coordinate and put everything together within one company? Transaction frequency is another influence. If I'm always having to integrate, talk to each other, negotiate, and all these things, maybe I should just make it easier if we are part of the same company. And then the typical assumptions that come with transaction cost economics and behavioral economics in general. Uncertainty, bounded rationality, opportunism. I want to avoid somebody taking advantage of me. We have asymmetries of information. I don't know very well what they are doing. They don't know very well what I'm doing. I cannot process all the information. There is a lot of challenges for creating contracts that will govern this. So maybe it's just easier to just put everything together within the company. That's one approach, market failure. Another one, which is also coming from economics, is a story of market power. And here the analysis or the way to think about it is, look, informed from the story of opportunism, I want to avoid somebody taking advantage of me. So what if there is only one distribution company? If they buy a supplier and all of a sudden I don't have access to the market directly. So they can exert a lot of power, and maybe they demand that I give them much better conditions, much higher quality, lower prices, things like this. Or that's what I want to do. I want to exploit market power, and that's what I want to do. I want to go and integrate that distributor so that other companies within the same industry no longer have access to the final, to the customers or the final consumer, and with that I can exclude them from entering this is a story of market power. Then the third one, which works in very few cases, it's a story that actually there is no supplier or there is no distributor. I have to invest and create. It's not a concern that, well, they might behave opportunistically, or they don't have the incentive to invest in assets that enable us to transact better. It's not a story of market power, but actually there's nobody here. New industries, new technologies. I create something completely new, and hey, let's just create a distribution channel because otherwise I can't sell my products. That's one explanation. Other explanations, and this is a good story of when shouldn't I vertically integrate, although these are given in some cases as explanations. Well, there is a lot of cyclicality in earnings, so it might be good to invest in another industry so that if there is a slump in my industry, that one might not be as affected. Not quite a good explanation, because if you think about it, if we are connected as part of a supply chain, if there is a problem here, that is going to be reflected in other segments of the chain. If there is a problem with them, that is also going to be reflected in my segment. So it's not quite a good explanation for integrating vertically. Another story is that, I want to make sure that I always have a supply available, unless there is a big crisis or a natural disaster, some kind of a extreme condition. If the market is more or less efficient, and if there are several suppliers, it's very difficult that somebody is not going to be able to obtain supplies, going to exclude me. This is different from the story of avoiding market power. This is a concern that I might not be able to buy. If the market is more or less efficient, you're always going to buy. You always can find a supplier. You might not be getting the preferred supplier. That's a different story. And then the final thing is that, well, you know what happens. The suppliers, they always produce and they have their costs and they add a margin before they sell to me. So if I integrate vertically, I'm going to keep the margin for myself. It's kind of a faulty explanation. Why? Because yes, you are vertically integrating. Yes, you are keeping that margin, but you have to take into account that that's adding complexity. They were good at what they were doing. You are good at what you were doing. Now you are having to manage different segments. How well are you at managing those segments? Is that margin going to really be coming into your operation? And think that by buying your supplier, maybe they were selling to other companies. Those other companies no longer want to buy from that supplier because now it is part of a competitor, so you lose the market, becomes less efficient. Not a good story. Think about a very simple example. You happen to be a restaurant. It will be good if we have our exclusive farm so that we can get the type of products that we want, and the lettuce is always going to be fresh because we go and cut it, and the meat is going to be the best. Yes, but that means that you are not going to be able to manage it at the same time as you manage the restaurant. What are your skills? This is a story of challenging complexity when you get into vertical integration. So think about this way. Do we have a market failure or a potential for market failure or potential for market power? Don't try to think about other issues. So with this, we get into what are the steps for analyzing this. So this is relatively complicated in the sense that it does require a lot of information, but it can provide you with a very good understanding of what is happening. What are different steps? And this means that different steps in which you could have companies operating as such. If you're thinking, manufacturing, putting this next to the other, can we separate the two companies? In some cases, you might be able to do that. And if you're thinking, I don't know, for example, automobiles, parts, and you can have the bolts, but then you can have the systems, you can have complete, instead of just buying the fabric and buying the foam to produce seats, you can actually buy the complete seats as a system that then you can integrate within the car. So these are different ways of analyzing the level at which you want to get into the different segments. And from there, who is already here, and try to understand how difficult is it to coordinate, transact across the different segments. And not just the general transaction, but with these particular companies. If there is one single company that controls one particular product, that might be a signal that, well, maybe there might be an issue here with this particular relationship. If there are lots of companies in each of the segments, there might be less of an issue in terms of finding the supplier that can help you. From there, static analysis, if you want. Are there any kind of vertical market failures? The discussions we were discussing, the issues we were discussing before. Do we have a few buyers or suppliers? Do we have issues of high asset specificity, uncertainty, potential for hold-up, things like this? And then what can you do to avoid issues of market power? Or will somebody be interested in exercising market power potentially, or actually are they doing that? Should you think about maybe integrating to exercise market power? And then after that, dynamics. What will happen in the future? Of course, it's always very difficult to identify the future, but you always can get a sense of technological evolution that might undermine current relationships. Yes, this segment was controlled by this company, but hey, there is a new material, and now with this new material, we can basically do things completely different. It's going to be lighter, so we no longer require this other type of material. Things like this that are going to change those relationships, and from there, that's when you start thinking, to what extent am I going to vertical integrate or not? Once you have done this, think about other issues to take into account. Some integration criteria for integration decisions. How long is it going to take you to do it? Yes, you can buy suppliers, or you can go into doing it alone rather than buying the suppliers, thinking that, look, carefully, it might add additional capacity, which elicits competition from incumbent companies. Can you train people? How much do you know about that particular segment? Issues of transaction costs. How do we coordinate? How do we establish the new operation? How much do we bring ideas and then push them into the next step? And then the risk that, hey, if there is a problem with the changes here, is it going to affect us or not? Are we going to be able to exclude others? And then coordination, the complexity that comes with doing everything by yourself. Are you going to be able to produce better quality than existing suppliers? Other things to think about, and this is a slightly different story because this is thinking about innovation. Should invest in creating something new. This is coming from this. And the story here is, do you need to get specialized complementary assets? And this is a very nice decision tree, depending on whether no or yes, and whether it is easy to copy or not. You get into the different strategies to licensing to everybody, to licensing to a few, or maybe you just get into joint ventures. So this is a good understanding of the story of market power and the story of complementary resources to develop those innovations. And then finally, restructuring. How attractive is this? And this is connecting to the analysis of industry. Is this attractive as an industry as such? Can you achieve profitability? If that is the case, think about how much do you integrate, issues of entry barriers, thinking about whether this is going to help you become better or whether all of this is just going to be adding complexity to your operations. So that's the story of vertical integration. We next move into, if you want, the flip side, which is a strategic outsourcing, and this is coming from the point of view of the resource-based view, which is a theory coming out of strategic management. And the story is not so much transaction costs, but core competences. The recommendations here: when should you subcontract something else, and when should you concentrate on doing it yourself? Message is, do what you're doing best and rely on others for what they do best. So if you are really good at doing everything and you are kind of best in class in all the different segments, by all means, continue doing that. If you're best in class in a few of them, start thinking, is there somebody that can help me become better because I'm going to just subcontract some of those activities to them? And then I'm accessing their sources of advantage, their core competencies, and integrating them within my value chain. This is a story of cooperation with suppliers to enhance the competitive advantage of the company. Taking into account, and this is important, that there are also transaction costs, and you have to take into consideration whether you are going to end up with some market failure or the ability to suppliers exercise market power over you. But here the analysis is, we start with what are we good at, what are your sources, what are our sources of advantage, what are the suppliers' sources of advantage, is there a way that enables us to concentrate in doing the best and allowing others that do the best to enhance our ability. And then can we establish contracts that will enable us to do that without leading to a problem of market failure and then rely on somebody who's going to exercise market power over us. So this is the story of thinking in a different way about whether you want to vertical integrate or not. And the way to do this is a simple way is let's analyze all the different activities, and this is not so much vertical integration, but specific activities. Do we do them in-house? Do we outsource to somebody else? And this is an example. For example, you see in the bottom, the value chain from logistics, research, design, then we go to warehousing, manufacturing, quality control. This is a long chain within the value activities of the company. Some of them are strategically outsourced to others. What is the condition? What is the cost of doing this? What is the value that we are extracting? How do we compare to other companies? Which is the best company in the industry? Should we just work with them rather than have us do most of this? And then the decision is, how does this enhance your competitive advantage, your competitive edge? And then to what extent is this going to create some level of strategic vulnerability because you are relying on another company? So different levels of control and flexibility depending on these two situations. So to conclude, vertical integration, one of the options for using the sources of competitive advantage, and now we're getting into corporate strategy. You are going beyond the business as such and deciding whether you're going to invest in a variety of activities. The first thing to understand, within the value chain, we have two different ones, the company and then the industry level value chain. How many of those activities do you do in the company? And then within the value chain of the industry, how many of the different segments do you do in the company? All of this is choice. You can concentrate on very few things, or you can try to coordinate a long chain of activities. Think about it, whether you want to go backward or forward, and two different ways of thinking about it. Vertical integration from a transaction cost approach, the story of market failures and market power. Under which conditions do we face this? And then if there are market failures, think about, well, let's just integrate with the company. If there's potential for market power, we should be thinking about exercising that market power or avoiding somebody else exercising their market power over us. Strategic sourcing, much more in, if you want, in specific activities. And here the story is, what are we very good at? What are our sources of advantage? Is there something that we can rely on at another company that is really good at, so that we basically benefit from their sources of advantage? Taking into account the story of potential reliance on somebody that might undermine in the long run our sources of advantage because they exercise market power over us. So that's the story for today, market value chain integration and the level at which we vertically integrate within activities within the company and across the industry. Thank you very much. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.